Well, folks, thanks so much for tuning in today. And again, just a ton of stuff to cover. We're going to give you insights behind the scenes from the main stories, things you won't get from mainstream media. Our numbers continue to go up. Comments are great. Please keep them coming in. Let's jump right into it. Of course, Iran and the attacks there, everything that's top of the line, everywhere to go. And what we do notice, and we predicted that this would start to have more of a regional effect, the insanity of the Ayatollah's regime, even though he's dead, they continue. They've now launched attacks or launched their missiles with not much effect, but launched at 12 different countries now, including other Arab and Muslim states. As we have predicted and said for a long time, completely lunatic. They love death. They say they will win because they love death. And we fear death. Let's keep a close eye on what's going on there, but definitely there are the positive sides in which the U.S. now claims the U.S. and Israel has total superiority in the air and total superiority on the sea, having sunk most, if not all, of Iran's navy and wiped out most, if not all, of their Air Force. However, very interesting to see a Democrat come forward in the States. Bill Foster is his name, and he has raised the concern using intelligence briefings that what we should be concerned about now are the smaller sites embedded deep, deep in the ground in Iran that have smaller stockpiles of uranium and radioactive material, which can be used to create smaller nuclear weapons, nuclear explosive devices, which cannot be fitted onto ballistic missiles, but which can be transported either by vehicles or other means and detonated in cities and create Hiroshima-type damage. So real concerns there, and what will be the approach to taking out and closing off many of these smaller nuclear sites. The Ayatollah, of course, Khomeini, is dead, and his son is now said to be stepping into the gap. I guess his son doesn't have much hope in terms of longevity. They will get him sooner or later. They say he is even more lunatic than the father, and things could get even crazier. We'll wait to see what happens there. Keep in mind that the Ayatollah himself, as in many of these regimes, including in Gaza, the leaders become millionaires, if not billionaires, in terms of taking money, which would include not just money from their oil and gas reserves, but some of these other countries and some of these other areas. For instance, Hamas, where they get money from the UN. The leaders personally make sure that they get beautiful villas and tourist accommodations that they own in resort countries around the world while their people suffer. So we'll see there is a bit of an incentive to be, an Ayatollah or a leader of some of these terrorist regimes if you can just live. Well, China has come out strongly condemning, of course, what is going on in terms of the attacks on Iran. China and Iran have a very close relationship. And now we're seeing something that has kind of startled the world. First of all, Prime Minister Carney in Canada came out in clear support, saying the U.S. and Israel have to do this. They have to attack Iran. Now then he started to moderate, and now it appears he's completely flipped on it. And let me tell you why. We're going to take a snapshot of something that happened, has been largely under the radar, but it was a by-election in the UK near Manchester. Now, I predicted this. Our regular listeners and viewers will know I talked about this last week before it happened. In this particular by-election, which had always been held by the Labour Party, the Socialist Party, very strongly for decades, it flipped and went to the Greens, and people are saying, oh, well, I guess there's more young people voting Green. And we find out that's not it at all. As we predicted, the Muslim population in the constituency of Gorton and Denton is what it's called, near Manchester. It's almost 30% Muslim population. Now, that's not enough to win a majority in and of its own, but it's enough if it joins with another party in terms of the votes to topple the existing incumbent and maybe get a majority. That's exactly what happened. Across the UK, the Labour Party is in danger because the Muslim vote, which has always voted and stood with the Socialists, is going against them, going against Starmer and the Labour, because Labour, when the Gaza attacks first happened back in October 7th, when those attacks happened, there was initial support Prime Minister Starmer came out saying, well, Israel has a right to defend itself. And that made the Muslim community, the Islamic vote in the UK, furious, and they said they're going to make him pay for that. Here's the payoff. The Muslim vote, then joining with the Green Party, gave enough to knock out the Liberals. Watch for that trend to continue. To knock out the Labour vote. That's why in Canada you see Prime Minister Carney first coming out supportive of what the US and Israel Air Force is doing in taking out the lunatic dictators of Iran who were threatening nuclear attacks. And then they started getting some pushback from in their party, and then it started spreading across the country, the Islamic Muslim vote, mad at the Liberals, and so you see the Liberals now also moderating, going from strong support to not so much. Other things happen under the radar when you have something like a war going on, and certainly in the Muslim world that's been happening. In Iraq, they had a law that they passed in 1959 called the Personal Status Law, and this was to protect women, especially young women, from strict Sharia law, which exposed them to be married at very young ages. As a matter of fact, as soon as they hit puberty. And so that law was brought in 59. It kind of moderated things, but that's been tossed out now. And in Iraq now, if you want to claim Sharia, while this other law stays on the books, you can get around it by saying you want Sharia law. And now we are seeing young women, young girls as young as 9 years old being offered up in marriage. We're trying to get the status report. We're hearing reports. We want them confirmed that even these young girls are being sold to richer, older Arab men. That part we're still working on confirming. But the fact the law has been changed is real, and girls as young as 9 are being married. For all of those who think Sharia law might be the way to go, you need to give that some consideration. Well, in Ontario, a judge there has just put on hold something pretty significant. There is something called, as you know, in every province, a sex offender registry, and that's where somebody who's been convicted, found guilty of sexual crimes against children, they get put on a registry just so for a certain period of time so that authorities can kind of keep an eye on things, and if there's a sexual offense that happens and they can't find the perpetrator, they can use that registry to collect DNA and maybe get the person who has been doing, whether it's killing or sexually attacking young children. Well, this judge, in one particular case that's being looked at right now, the offender has 8 counts of sexual offenses against young children, against 4 different children, 8 counts. And the judge is now saying there's going to be a decision. The judge may throw out the right for the entire sexual offender registry, saying it's against a person's rights. That's being looked at carefully because in Ontario there are 29,000 names of sexual offenders on that registry. The possibility that that could be thrown out, of course, I'll leave up to your own imagination, and this is what you get when you have Liberal judges on the benches. So on that note, too, in terms of the ongoing failure of the federal Liberal policy related to trying to collect guns, that's been a total failure. But by October, it's going to be mandatory. They'll be coming to people's houses collecting guns that the government has newly qualified as dangerous, and yet at the same time we see homicides related to weapons. Knives have now surpassed the method of choice. BC and Quebec in particular, death by knives, by stabbing, homicides have exceeded considerably gun crime, something to keep in mind. On the stock market, oil and gas prices, of course, going up, as you can see, and so stocks in those particular companies going up. Because of what's going on with the Iran war, of course, around the world, and especially in the U.S., which sets interest rates for the U.S., and that affects other jurisdictions, we're looking at a possibility of lowering rates before the war broke out. Now they're staying steady, maybe even hinting it may notch up an inch or 2 higher. This will affect companies that are, let's say, weaker financed. We're looking for rates to drop down a bit so they could refinance and get their payments at a lower rate. Now that appears not to be happening, so you're going to see some decrease in spending and borrowing, and weaker finance companies may be running into some trouble. Well, on the world world of entertainment, we like to just touch on the culture situation that's going on around us. Those of you who are fond of Sara J Maas, she writes the very, very famous The Courts of Thrones and Roses series, highly, really, really hot sort of romanticises, they call them. And her sales are in the billions. She's just excited all of her followers. She's coming out with 2 new books. She hasn't put out some things for a while. And her books sell, the number of readers are in the billions over the total series. And what is being commented on now, as the books have progressed over the years, they're becoming increasingly graphic. For those of you who want romance with highly sexualized content, very graphic, much more inclusion of LGBTQ themes, much more widespread, and now to the point where public libraries are moving her books from the what they call the general section to the adult section. Nothing to stop, of course, somebody wandering into that particular section, but that's got people worried, especially as kids have access to the books. And we do know, too, that exposure to any types of pornography over time, even soft porn, does have a detrimental effect. That's a whole different area of study. We'll just leave that thought with you as Sarah's books go wildly on sale. To balance that out, The Chosen, that particular TV series continues to be incredibly well watched. It's into the millions. I'm not sure that it's hit the billions yet to compete with Sarah. And also the recent animated film King of Kings, which is the life of Jesus, hitting a record for animated faith-based films. Their first weekend out, 54 million, and really cracking the market there. More and more young kids being exposed to faith-based animated productions. Folks, let's keep an eye on the war. We'll keep you posted tomorrow. Thanks for joining in. Bye for now.